Here we are. This is this is Rabbit Holes with Aaron, excuse me, and I'm Aaron. And we go down all kinds of rabbit holes. We try to make a difference in people's lives and bring insight and discovery and curiosity. And today with me, I have Jeff Ramey, an old friend from back in the day. We went to college and we're in fraternity together. Of course, this back in the day for us is 5 years ago. But, we're we're non-traditional students, and now we're just doing life and trying so many new things. Beekeeping is one of them. But anyway, I'll let you introduce yourself and introduce your company or whatever you want to, Jeff.
Okay, well, my name is Jeffrey Ramey. I am a veteran, UNT alumni, Omega Delta Sigma fraternity veteran, alumni, and owner of Corsair Coffee Company in Purdon, Texas. Oh, and a novice
Okay.
beekeeper.
Yeah, he's getting started beekeeping. Well, and it bears mentioning that he was in one of my early rougher episodes where episode 3, I think, and I say rougher not because of him or our content, but because we had some cell phone issues that, I had to kind of try and edit out and I didn't do so good, but hey, I'm learning and I'm growing, so we're hoping for better results this time, but thanks for sticking with us anyway. So we talked beforehand. We want to start off with continuing, I guess. This would be part 3 of Confessions of a Narcissist, and we're just going to see if we can run into any more confessions, but we're also going to just think about narcissism a little bit more from a different perspective. And to start us off, I've been reading this book. It's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. And it has been blowing my mind every day. I started reading it when I run, excuse me, in the mornings. And so, yeah, she talked about, and it made me think of this podcast because she talked about a business that most people would probably be familiar with from the 90s or early 2000s. I think it was 2001. And she observed a lot of narcissistic business practices. So that takes it a different angle, and you might have heard of it. The company was called Enron. And they were so focused on performance that they won the prestigious Forbes Business of the Year award 6 times in a row. And then the next year, they crashed and burned and disappeared. And everybody lost their retirement benefits, their medical benefits. Everybody in the company got robbed, and there was a lot of bad bookkeeping, and I'm sure you're more familiar with it than I am, Jeff. But anyway, she talked about how when you're worried so much about appearance that you let everything else fall away, integrity. As a matter of fact, when you worry about appearance too much, then it builds this mindset of perfectionism, where you gotta look really good. If you don't look really good, then you get fired. And that's kind of the environment that was in Enron, according to Angela Duckworth. And so, what do you think about that, Jeff?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to speak about. The fake it till you make it doesn't necessarily uh, parlay into appearances. The fake it till you make it's more about attitude, at least in my perspective.
Yeah,
See yourself as a success, positive thinking, conduct yourself as a successful person, fake it till you make it, until your reality
right.
matches your ambition and your how you see yourself. I don't think that's like buying fake Rolexes and and trying to pretend something you're not. I don't see that in that strain. The
Well,
second
and I
thing,
guess,
oh,
yeah, go ahead. No, go
no,
ahead.
no, and the second thing is, earlier you said that on the narcissistic thing, I you could never be a narcissist. Narcissists
Right.
lack
Yeah,
they lack empathy, and
right.
you're one of the most empathetic people I've ever known.
Right. And yeah, I understand what you're talking about because we talked before the episode of what we were going to talk about. And I was saying in the process, I realized Confessions of a Narcissist, I recognized I had narcissistic tendencies, but that did not equal me being a narcissist. And I said I came by those tendencies honestly from just picking up behavior of my parents they had some hidden things going on, but I still wanted to act like my dad, which is love bombing, and my mom, which is passive aggressive communication, instead of honest and clear communication about what I want. And so I agree with you, and I appreciate you saying that, just in case I didn't know. But yeah, I come to discover like, well, I wasn't really a narcissist. Number one, narcissists won't confess anything. Number two, you know, and you can just go down the list. But, I think it was important to pull out narcissistic tendencies and talk to people about maybe where they come from and think about where they come from and where they go. And, that what does the timeline of a narcissist look like versus their victim? And see, I thought the narcissist and the victim, they just trade places. The narcissist hurts the victim and drains them of all life, and then they rise to life again as a narcissist, vowing to never be hurt again. So that's kind of, catching you up is what I've been thinking about, what's been bouncing around in my brain. And what do you think about that?
I think at the core of narcissism is selfishness. That
Yeah.
that is the core of it all. So I don't think victims actually become narcissists. I think they build walls for defenses, and maybe they shut
Mm,
themselves in. But they're not being selfish. They're just being overprotective of themselves, because you have to have that selfish tendency, like you were talking about in Enron. Selfishness, and I got to get my share, and I got to get the heck with the other guy. No empathy for anybody else. It's all
right.
based in selfishness. And I don't think the victims become selfish just because they were victimized. So I don't know that I would agree with the victims becoming narcissists themselves. But everyone has narcissistic tendencies.
Okay.
We're all, from the time we're born.
Right.
Yeah, toddlers are going, mine, mine, mine. Everything's mine. No, and just thinking of self, and and it's a lot of relationships. They're looking for, you have your needs, and if you focus solely on your needs, that's a narcissistic tendency. You may not be a narcissist, but you're being selfish and only thinking about your own needs. So yeah, I think the core of it, the root of it, is selfishness.
Yeah. Well, what are some other narcissistic tendencies that people can have? Do you recognize any in yourself? And feel free, comfortable to share whatever you're comfortable sharing, but or in anybody else, or over the course of your life, maybe you want to examine somebody you've experienced. What do you think?
Well, that's a well, that's a tough subject to broach right there. I think narcissism, like I said, the core of it's selfishness. But there's also the egotistical side of it, where I
Hmm.
can't be wrong. I'm the smartest person in the room. Let's see, what else would be a narcissistic tendency? Let's see, smartest person in the room, can't be wrong, never admit being incorrect, blaming others for your failures, no,
Hmm.
not taking accountability. The list just goes on and on. Basically, all the bad traits you don't want.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and for me, I've been accused of being a narcissist before. But like you, I don't think I am. I'm way too empathetic. I feel for other people.
Yeah.
They're going through something tough. It hurts me to think of them in that position. But that's not something a narcissist would ever do. I grew up in a pretty it wasn't on the outside appearances it looked like Leave It to Beaver. But there was a lot of childhood trauma in my life, and being bullied and taken advantage of, devalued, I guess,
Hmm. Yeah.
devalued by my peers at a young age. And now as an older man, I realize a lot of that was jealousy. And that would sound like narcissism, but they were jealous of things that other people have told me I have talents in, like my art,
Right.
because I won many competitions and trophies, and uh and that was something that set me apart from them. In childhood, you don't want to be set apart. You want to be
Right.
like your peers, right? If they can't do everything you can do, then you're the enemy, and they start
Right.
throwing insults and devaluing you. And so I just got to where I didn't want to be devalued anymore. So I became a bit of an academic.
Hmm.
I wanted the true sense of the word dilettante was now they has a negative connotation to it, but that's not the history of the word. The history is you jack of all trades, master of none.
Hmm.
Where you learn a little bit about this, a little bit about that, a little bit, lots of dilettantes. Ben Franklin was a dilettante. He dabbled in this, he dabbled in that, and he knew more than the average guy, but he was not a master of all those traits. And so that's what I set out to be. I dive in to the subjects, whatever my ADD obsessive compulsive twist is today.
Right.
It's like like coffee business. I always wanted to have a coffee business, but I learned everything I could about coffee, everything. Uh,
Yeah.
then I found a bee swarm in a tree that fell down in a storm, and so I said, well, I guess I'm going to take care of these bees now, and so I
Yeah.
dove into beekeeping. And I learned way more than the average person about bees, and I'm
Right.
still learning. I've still got a lot to learn. I'm digging a pond. Well, I've never dug a pond before, so I dove into that and started watching all these YouTube videos and documentaries on how to build a pond and how you have to install a keyway. Otherwise, it's just going to leak. And if you do develop leaks, this is what the chemicals you use, and then the environment, the oh, what's the word? The economy of a pond.
Ecosystem.
Thank you. That's the word. Ecosystem of ponds. How you have to have aeration if you're going to stock it with fish. How to weed control. Cattails are good, but they bring in muskrats and just all
Yeah.
these little details. Whatever the twist is today, the flavor of the day, I dive all in. Sometimes I come off as being a narcissist to people who don't know me.
Right.
Because you know everything, don't you? No, I don't know everything. Knowing you don't know everything is a good place to be. Admitting, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm going to try to learn as much as I can. But
Right.
even with my kids, they're adults and they have kids of their own. But they're in this, and sometimes they're like, "Dad, you can never be wrong. You can never just admit you're wrong." And I'm like, I'm wrong all the time. What are you talking about? The reason I
Yeah.
act the way I do is because I've been wrong so many times. I don't want that to happen anymore. So I
Right. I'm tired
read
of
and
being wrong.
yeah, I'm tired of being wrong. So I read and I study. And when I come up with some off the wall comment, according to you, or according to my kids, you think it's because I'm a know it all. It's because I've already delved into this a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know it all. I may know more than you, but I don't know it all.
Right.
And it comes from an insecurity. It doesn't come from an ego. It comes from being insecure.
Hmm.
And that's but it can be mistaken for narcissism sometimes.
Hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that well thought out answer about how sometimes you are misinterpreted as a narcissist too. And so many ways to go with the topic. But when you were talking about digging a lake and ecosystems and stuff like that, I thought, are there any narcissists in nature?
Well, I have to correct you right quick. I'm not ambitious enough to dig a lake. Okay, I've got a small pond.
Oh, there we go. Whatever. It's a body of water, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. But yeah, I thought, I don't think there's any I don't think anything in nature is so selfish that it doesn't care about anything else except mankind.
Well,
Dun, dun,
I'd have to
dun.
think about that. I
Yeah,
that would require a certain cognitive level of self awareness, and I don't
yeah.
know how many animals. Maybe the higher primates, the gorillas, but I don't know how many of them are really that self aware and not just operating mainly on instinct.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
in order to be a narcissist, I would think you would have to be self aware and and be egocentric and not just instinct
Well,
like I'm hungry, I need to kill something.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hungry. Yeah. So then I wonder how a narcissist is made, narcissist, because I am saying from trauma. So that's where I was saying like a victim becomes a narcissist because maybe they have a really traumatic childhood. And out of that, the child of them says, I promise myself I will never be hurt again. And maybe then at that point they start to distance people and keep people far away. And it means Like they start projecting an image of who they are, a perfect image. And if anybody comes in and seems to imply that that's not a perfect image, then they gaslight and blame and backpedal and sink into the shadows or whatever.
Well, I can definitely agree with you. I think you've changed my opinion on that. I can see where that would
Because
be.
they're not just born, they're
No,
not
no,
just born that
no,
way.
no. They're not. Well, I don't know. They might be, but I don't know that they are. But like in my particular instance, the insecurity. Whereas
Yeah,
I went a different route. I would think I went and said, "Well, I'm going to learn more.
right,
I'm going to educate myself more. I'm going to be valuable because I'm going to obtain knowledge and be able to help people, and be Johnny on the spot with the right answer if at all possible." Whereas I think a narcissist just kind of says, "To heck with you. You're all wrong. I'm fine. You must be the problem." And then they just build up this delusion that I'm perfect. I do. If you have a problem with me, you're the problem. You know, um,
right.
I think that would be I think that would be the path that a narcissist would choose. Let me tell you, taking the academic route is way harder. Try,
Yeah.
you got to go through a lot of boring stuff,
Well,
man. You got to go through a lot of boring
well,
stuff to know all this stuff.
I don't know if I agree. I mean, I've been
Hmm.
thinking of, we all like to look at narcissists say, you know what? It's our time to blame you because we haven't been able to blame you. We've been in relationships with different narcissists. They always dodge it like, whoo, like kung fu, like they're dodging our any responsibility and they're hiding their insecurities. And, what is the end goal or how do they end up? And I think vampires are a really good metaphor that's used in a previous episode. They end up alone in a cave somewhere, feeding off of bats or small animals. They've eaten everybody in the village,
Yeah.
right? And there's nobody, another human within 500 miles. And I think that's where the narcissist ultimately ends up when
Hey,
they're finally found out, they're all alone, sad, and anyway, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
no, I agree with you. Because after a while, you run out of people willing to be your victim, and
Yeah,
they just don't want to be around you anymore. And then your social world just collapses, implodes. It just closes in on you because you don't care enough about other people. It's always for you, never for your friends, or never going out of your way to help somebody else just because. There's always got to be an ulterior motive, or some kickback to you or something.
yeah,
Like when in the Bible it talks about how when you give it secretly, so it's just between you and God. Because the guy who gives in front of everybody for everyone to see and praise him for being so charitable, he's gotten his reward. That was it.
right,
That was
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Little bit of attention or moving up the popularity ladder or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I mean, because how do we think of them? We're like all those darn narcissists. Now that they're free of all blame, they're off partying somewhere together and having a great time. And no, that's not where it goes at all. Right?
I know. I think
Not
they're
at all.
stuck. They're stuck in a loop. They just because
Yeah,
they can never get out of that loop because they never have any true mutually beneficial relationships. I think they just stay in this loop of victimizing somebody, and then that victim removes themselves from their little plot, and so they search out a new victim, and they never progress past that stage. They just keep looping through that stage,
yeah.
and so that's
Well,
that's a sad life.
and the theory that I've been thinking about is that in their loop, like how many no's do they have to hit before they finally like, because people get completely drained. They're like Energizer batteries, right? They're taking everything out of them and they finally stand up and say, no, I can't do it anymore. And they leave or whatever. And so how many of those no's does it take for a narcissist to say, this isn't working the way I thought it was going to be? I thought, I would never be hurt and I'd be surrounded by people. But now I'm never hurt and there's not a person within 500 miles of me, or will ever come that close because they give off signals, they give off signs. And, when you're talking about vampires, there's dead people and dead animals,
Yeah.
and there's an
Well, the
empty
fangs are a dead
village,
giveaway too.
right? Yeah. Yeah, if you happen to upon them at night. But yeah, but anyway, well, and that's another interesting dynamic is vampires can look at you with their eyes and it can mesmerize you and you're
Gaslight
under
you.
the spell. Yeah, and you're doing what they want you to do. I can't tell you how many times I whisper to myself in a relationship with a narcissist, if I only try a little bit better and work a little harder, then I'll get them to see and they'll change, you know?
I don't think they ever will. I don't think they ever will. But in order for them to change, they would first have to bring down their defenses a little bit because everyone that leaves them, remember, it's well, if you have a problem with me, you're the problem.
Right.
They have to admit fault, that they're not perfect at everything, that they have issues, they have character flaws. Narcissists, they don't want it. They're not going to do that, man. Maybe on their deathbed.
Right.
So they're never going to, get out of that loop. It's not going to be a certain number of. It's not a numbers game. It's not, well, 17 victims, so maybe I'm the problem. They'll never contemplate that
You
question.
don't think so? I mean, if somebody can turn them into narcissists, then maybe somebody can turn them back normal again, into human again. I mean, that's
Well,
not how vampires work, but I
Jesus,
mean, we're human.
Jesus,
Well, yeah, right? Yeah, confess your sins, and people are like, go ahead.
yeah, no, Jesus can, but that's aside from, he's divine being. He's the Son of God. And I don't think a normal person has a chance. It's going to have to be self-driven. It's going to have to be like quitting being a narcissist because they decide they want to.
Right. Well, and no, I completely agree with you. And what I was saying with how many no's, it's not a person that's going to get them to do it, but they're going to realize, well, let's check my data. How is this working my life? I'm 65. No family is around me or want to come near me. I have no friends. Well, maybe I am the problem. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. I'm only speculating, but
Well,
my friend,
neither one of us are narcissists, so we can't really view it from their perspective. But I would think the narcissist's first go-to play would be, all my friends are stupid, all my family are stupid, they're all stupid.
yeah,
That's why they're not smart enough to be around me. That would probably be their go.
right. Yeah, but yeah, there's that data just lying around. They're like that I was talking about. Nobody's around me. I live with the lights turned off in my house, and eventually maybe they do the math, and maybe they figure it out like this isn't working. What can I try differently? Maybe they need, I know, cause and this goes back to something you said that I also said previously. And that was like, how did I not turn into a narcissist with trauma? And you said because you decided to be smarter and you took it like a knowledge route and that helped you out of that.
Yeah, I
And
realized my deficiencies. I realized I was deficient. That
right,
if I wanted to be valued more highly by others, I needed to bring more value to the table,
right.
rather than just casting it all on them and saying, well, they're the problem. I'm fine.
Yeah.
They're the
So,
problem.
and so in a nutshell, you're saying like, I took responsibility
Yeah,
for my deficiencies and I sought to overcome them.
yeah. It would be so easy. It would be so easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, I'm not the problem. They're just stupid. That would be the
Right.
easy way out. And that's where you would have to do some real soul searching and saying, is everybody stupid? Or maybe I have some deficiencies that I need to work on.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I see that's kind of similar to my answer. My answer was why when I asked myself that question, my answer was, well, I've forgiven every narcissist that's hurt me, from parents on forward or even pre-parents on forward. I, to the extent that I can remember, and new memories pop up and I take a look at them through this lens of, okay, where's my responsibility at? Oh yeah, I made a bad decision here, you know? And so I guess that's the same kind of thing. Like I took responsibility for
Yeah.
the mistakes I caused and the mistakes I made and ownership, but I also allowed other things to have some responsibility, like the culture we're in, my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, in smaller degrees, But you know what I'm saying? So everybody's got a little bit of me making this bad decision. You know, they gave me this data, and you know, I'm 11 years old, let's say. You know, I don't have any life experience. I'm drawing upon my data from my parents and grandparents and learning from their patterns and their behaviors. And just like I said, picking up some narcissistic stuff in there too. And, but I look back at every memory, well, every memory I can, and I take responsibility. And then I take that hat off and put the other hat on and forgive myself, you know, at the same time. But I think that's something common to
That's
do is took
that's hard.
responsibility.
That's hard. I don't remember where I heard it. I didn't come up with it because I'm not a narcissist. I'm not going to claim it. But I heard it from someplace, and
Hey,
it was from a trusted source. Taking ownership of your problems is the only way to solve the matter because you can't fix other people. If the problem is yours, you have the power to search for solutions. If the problem is somebody else, you have no power because you're not going to be
right.
able to fix it for you know. And so, yeah, taking accountability for taking accountability for a problem, even if you didn't create it, taking ownership of it allows you the authority and gives you the power to do something about that problem.
And to forgive it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the hard part,
Yeah.
the forgiveness thing. I'm still struggling with that. I'm 59 years old, man. I still struggle with forgiveness. And my motivation for forgiving some of these people in my past that have really hurt me uh, is Jesus said you have to forgive if you want to be forgiven. And I'm thinking, I'm not getting any younger, and sooner or later I'm going to meet the good Lord, and I want to be forgiven my sins. And so
Yeah.
I better really work on this forgiveness thing and try really hard to forgive these people that I literally despise for the horrible things they've done to me. And then, like, Jesus was on the cross and he was forgiving the Romans as they were nailing him to the cross.
right.
Oh no, oh no, no, no. Can I strike them with a little bit of lightning first and then forgive them?
Yeah.
That is something really, really hard for me because I try very hard not to hurt anybody and try to be kind to everybody. But I'm learning that forgiveness and trust don't always go hand in hand. Or forgiveness and forgetting. When the Lord forgives
Yeah.
you, yeah, He forgets your sin. It's as far as the east is from the west. Humans, I don't think we have to. I can forgive somebody for doing me wrong, but I'll never forget it. Not once.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. I'll never trust them, the same way again because I realize there's the potential for them to hurt me again or to be distrustful,
yeah.
trust, you know. But that's probably and that's a family trait too. If you ever mess over anybody in my family, you only get one opportunity.
Yeah.
And my whole family is like that. We will give you carte blanche trust and give you, you say who you say you are. I will treat you with respect and dignity, and I will, you can tell me you're Superman. And I'm like, okay. But the minute you betray me or betray my trust, you're done. You no longer exist. Control Alt Delete. You don't exist in my life anymore. I
Yeah.
forgive you. I forgive you, but I'm also never going to allow you to get that close to me again, ever.
Can I drop a pebble in your pond just a little? I just want to
Yeah,
take a little
sure.
pebble out
Absolutely.
of out of out of Aaron's inner secret space. I'm gonna drop it in your pond, and that pebble is my experience with me. And my experience is going into that memory and seeing maybe something shameful. I mean, something I do not want to even think about in my memory. And what I realized, and maybe I'm just a kid and I'm even being abused or neglected. And in that memory, I realized that I was the one that betrayed myself. I was the one that made it available for them to take advantage of me. And I was the one that needed the most forgiveness for that. Because well, as a kid, you can't really stand your ground against your parents, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of learned helplessness there. But as an adult, like anytime I'm mad at somebody for taking advantage of me, I left the door open and unlocked. Like, here you go. Let me tell you my worst sins, which actually that's a real life habit that I used to have. let me warn you about how many mistakes. Let me tell you about my divorces and my addictions, and I'm gonna tell you about all this stuff. And yeah, hi, I'm Aaron. Well, can I be welcome to the group, right? And wonder why people would open fire on that stuff or treat me differently or judge me. Because if I open up my chest, for somebody to stab me, then there's going to be people that do. But if I close it up and kind of have more of a meritocracy as far as my own personal government, like you can get close to me. To get close to me, you have to kind of agree with me, right? It's automatically natural, or you have to have something new to add, or you have to be able to listen really good. And you're close to me. But if a person can get that close to me, then they rate a little bit of vulnerability. But if they're not close, I'm not going to open it up to get them close, right? So, oh yeah, by the way, I've got naked flesh over here guarding my heart. Oh, okay, I'll come over and stab you and take your money. It's like, but that's my situation and my story is I found that I was the one that left the door unlocked.
Well, see,
And I was the one I had to forgive primarily. And then once I forgave myself for that indecency, I didn't care what they did anymore. But that was my experience. What do you think about that?
I think you've got two areas there that are like opposite sides of the coin. On one hand, you're taking accountability because remember, if the problem is yours, you have the authority and the power to do something about it. The second side, though, is I don't think it's a character flaw to be honest and trusting of other people. That's just being a good human being.
Hmm.
Bad human beings take advantage of that, but that's not the fault of the good person who is just being nice and trusting and honest and forthright. That's not a fault. But by owning it and
Well,
say, well, I left myself wide open for that, taking ownership of the problem, that's a good way to resolve it. Just make sure the solution you come up with is healthy.
right, right. And, to say it another way, the overgiver attracts the overtaker. And the overtaker attracts the overgiver. And we're kind of talking in terms of codependency, but
Hmm.
like it's a pattern that has navigated most of my life is being an overgiver and like attracting, a female or romantic partner that's an overtaker. So yeah, that's the pattern that I recognized, and so I stopped being an oversharer. I can still be a sharer, you know, and I share things all over the place, with people. We talk, especially the podcast and conversations with people and Bible studies and different book discussions and so many different things where we're exchanging thoughts. But somehow, after I forgave myself for betraying myself in any memory I come to where I'm taken advantage of, now I don't ever attract anybody like that anymore. Nobody, well, people try. And
Have
they,
you
even
well
narcissists, they come close. Go ahead. Go ahead.
have you considered changing deodorants?
I was thinking it was the garlic, but I wasn't sure. The garlic and onions for lunch every
Vampires
day.
can't stand garlic, so you might be onto something there.
Yeah.
But it's
But anyway,
it's it's discretion. Yeah, you have the full benefit of discretion. You don't have to tell everybody everything about you. I mean, it's they don't own the right. Well, I say own. They don't have the right to demand everything from you. You're your own person. You have discretion. I will tell you what I want to tell you, and you can ask me things, but don't be upset and consider me deceitful if I choose not to answer. Don't lie. If I choose not to answer and go, well, that's too personal. I'm not willing to share that right now. You reserve the right of discretion. It's your own being. You have that right.
independence, free will. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
people
we
so
have
often see that
that.
as deceitful. You're like, well, he didn't tell me that. Well, it was at my discretion. I don't need to. I don't have to tell you everything about myself.
Yeah. I'm an autonomous human. I get to change my mind. well, you said you were going to go do this. Well, it didn't fit my schedule anymore. So I sent you a text and I changed my mind.
Yep,
You know,
it's your prerogative.
communication. Yeah. Yeah. And well, that reminds me of one of the greatest gifts, which may make a person immune to narcissists. The greatest gift I give myself is time to think about it. You know, and I was in a conversation with a guy the other day, and he thought it was a really good idea and volunteered to help a veteran out. And he's not a veteran, the guy helping. And he was going to offer to watch his child while he went to work because he was going through a divorce. And then he called me to enlist me in watching of this child. And the conversation went something like this: do you like toddlers? And I was like, well, now to think about it, actually, between you and me, Jeff, that seems like a weird question. But
Yeah.
I didn't think it was weird at the time, right?
Do you
I
like
mean,
toddlers? What with
we're
a
both,
little bit of barbecue sauce and a leash? Yeah.
no, yeah, I don't support drug traffickers or child trafficking either, to take it in that dark direction. But no, I didn't think about it that way at all because we're both Christians. We're both going to the same church for a while. And, he said, so I was wondering, I told this guy to watch his son or daughter, I don't remember the details. And I
Hmm.
was just wondering if you're available to come over to our house and maybe watch him. I was like, as a backup? No, well, I don't know, maybe. I was like, well, what day? I got my calendar open. Well, we don't know yet. He's going to be here first thing tomorrow. And I was like, well, tomorrow I got some stuff going on in the morning, but maybe in the afternoon. And, just continuing to give myself time by these normal rituals. Let me check my calendar.
Hmm.
Let me ask Jill. Eventually let me sleep on it. Let me pray about it. And you got these different techniques or gifts I give myself so that I don't have to change my mind, so that I don't have to step out of obligation. And with people, and this is probably just a narcissistic tendency this guy has, in a way of wanting to feel good, so he volunteers for stuff, but then he wants me to take responsibility for it.
Yeah,
And I
he
just,
wasn't volunteering at all. He was volunteering somebody else.
right.
Which
Well,
is very sus to begin with, because if the veteran agreed to let this gentleman um, watch his child,
right.
and then
A toddler.
he substituted somebody else that this guy had never met. It's like, yeah, it's just like, well, I couldn't be there, but saw this homeless guy on the street, and he looked fairly clean.
Right.
I mean, so I had him come in and watch your child. You what? No, that's sounds to me, and I know you're not supposed to prejudge things, but sounds to me like he wanted the credit and the emotional dopamine high of doing something nice, but didn't actually have the conviction to go do that nice thing. He wanted somebody else
Right.
to do it.
Yeah. So I never had to say no, and even, at the end of it, he was just like, he let out a big sigh. And, I was like, are you okay? Is everything okay? And so, and he was like, yeah, it's fine or whatever. And then I was like, okay, well, have a good evening. Click, but, that in that way, giving myself that time and space to think about it, and is so amazing. It saves so much time in the future, and not that I say no to everybody and this is my saying no strategy. No, but this I just noticed after the fact. I was like, well, that was a really weird conversation. What
Yeah,
was really going on there,
yeah.
And that's kind of the nuggets I was able to gather. But yeah, there's so many things,
Well, giving yourself
techniques.
that time to think, it allows you to see red flags that you may have overlooked. So, yeah,
Yeah.
giving yourself time to think about something is an awesome habit to be in.
Well, and ask a lot of questions in advance is what I'm learning too. Ask more questions. Because okay, well, we're gonna go do this. I'm like, I forget to ask what time and maybe what time is central time or whatever. Yeah. And then later on I'm in the wrong place sitting there by myself saying, well, what went wrong? What did I do wrong? And I just didn't ask enough questions. Like I show up, well, this is a good story. It's about bees, so you'll probably like it. But we were at the end of last season, the end of the summer last year, bee season, livestock season. Anyway, at the end of the last season, somebody reached out on Facebook and said, "Hey, I got a swarm of bees in my RV." And I was like, "Man, I can take care of that." Newly trained to use a vacuum to vacuum up bees and get bees out of places where people don't want them. So I went and checked out the RV and looked at it, looked where the bees were at, got my bee suit, walked around, but there was a lot, and I was like, we can do this. This is within our skill ability. Me and another guy who does bees with me, and so then we showed up. We showed up with the bee vacuum and all this stuff, and then we're suited up. We got the smoker going, and we're gonna go in there and vacuum up all the bees first, and then just cut the comb and take the comb. I mean, take the comb and put it in frames and put it in the hive box, and then dump the bees in later. Well, then I looked around and I couldn't find an outlet anywhere.
Oh no.
An outlet out on the outside of the house, right? So we could not plug in our bee vacuum.
Mm.
And from that, I developed a list of things to ask our potential bee clients, and that is there an outlet? Is it close? Do we need an extension cord? What's going on? So I developed like a list of 10 questions so that we could be absolutely prepared because we lost that hive.
Yeah.
So, because there was honey all over the place and bees all over the place stuck in it. And we're like, well, let's leave the top in. Maybe the bees will start moving the honey in and we did get the comb with brood cut and put in there. Well, we came back the next day or a couple days later, I think it was, and everything had been robbed. It looked like bees had come in and smashed. They pulled all the babies out and dumped them on the ground.
I
They
mean,
pulled all the pollen out and left it, and they got all the honey out of everywhere.
oh
Yeah,
wow.
and then so the honey.
Were you able to get the queen out of that swarm? No, that's why.
No,
Went
we did.
all the bees went back to their queen and left their stuff unprotected.
Well, and the thing was, there was no more comb in the RV itself, so we cut all and removed all the comb from the RV, got in the rubber bands in the box, and all the bees should migrate into it. But it's the end of summer, and some bees smelled the honey and came and cleaned up.
Yeah.
But so we learned a lot, but like a list going in was so helpful of lessons learned. How did I get on that topic?
You were talking about giving yourself time to think and red flags
Yeah,
that you may have overlooked and and that's how you come up with the well, there's no electricity. I need to ask more questions.
correct. Yeah, that's where I got there. Yeah. But yeah, so we kind of talked about how narcissists start perhaps in theory and how they end. And I wanted to talk about some things too with the business practices that and it's going to go back, but I never heard narcissism in business. And so the business had narcissistic practices. So I want to think about that for a second. And like they were more concerned about performance. And I want to talk about one of the things the CEO instituted, a program. It was called Rank or Yank. And they just rated everybody's performance multiple times throughout the year. And if you were in the top bottom 15%, you just instantly got fired. No questions asked.
Wow.
And so it was all about, it turned out to be all about hiding mistakes and hiding problems so that you look good and get good performance reviews so you get to stay in the company. And that kind of, what do they call that? A business atmosphere. In that atmosphere, things were rotting up from the inside. People were, cooking the books, so to speak, and accountants changing the numbers to keep some of the money, and all this stuff was going on. And it ended up, everybody was left in a lurch, you
Yeah.
know, when Enron collapsed.
I guess a one of the narcissistic principles that I can relate to in business would be, and you don't see this so much anymore, not this particular example, but I'm sure there's other businesses out there that operate this way, primarily sales. There used to be guys that would go door to door and try to sell you aluminum siding for your house.
Yeah.
And they even made a movie about it. coffee's for closers, and your coffee for winners and that kind of stuff. But they don't care about the customer or the community as long as they make the sale.
Right.
That would be a narcissistic tendency, because they're literally just going out and trying to pillage. I mean, it's like selling
Right.
somebody a worthless product. And it's worthless, but you're going to sell it to them. They're going to give you their money, and they're never going to see you again. That would be a
Right.
narcissistic principle for business, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. Burning bridges, right? Which is, yeah. Well, that makes me think how you, well, let's think about a healthy relationship because we kind of allude to that. But I'm almost thinking that like if you work on healthy relationships, that you become immune. It's like a vaccine, you become immune to being controlled by one. Like you just know all the moves, give yourself time, you accept responsibility, and you listen and pay attention, and and you'll be able to pick it up. But I like to think about building relationships like building a bridge. One person's on one side, the other person's on the other side. Hey, I want to come hang out with you. Well, I want to hang out with you too. Okay, here's the first step. Let's put this, one board down, right? Let's
Hmm.
say it's not like a construction,
Yeah.
feat of the century, but like just a wooden bridge that costs like a narrow chasm to get to your neighbor on the other side. And they look cool. You like them. You see them doing things that you like to do. Maybe they got a hive of bees out there. And I'm like, man, I want to get over there and talk to that guy. He's messing it up. Or maybe he's just raking in the honey and I'm doing something wrong. But anyway, I want to talk to him. And so I'm, what does that actually look like? I put down a board, they put down a board, I nail in some stuff, they nail in some stuff. Now suddenly we're like both leaning on stuff. I'm holding it up while he's nailing it, and all of a sudden we got a bridge, a pretty stable bridge that two people worked on. Go ahead.
That you built together, mutual
Right,
effort, not just one person doing all the work.
right.
You built it together. There was a give and take, and a shared goal, and both parties put in effort. So yeah, that's building a relationship. In my coffee business, the coffee businesses are. I'm not talking about Starbucks or some big commercial realty, or not realty, retail place. I'm talking about my type of business where I sell coffee, specialty coffee that's really small scale, produced by, I know the farmer. I buy my coffee beans from the farmer who owns the coffee farm in Ecuador. So it's a community. All the people who buy coffee from me, they're my friends and family, and if they're not my friends and family, they will soon be in that category, because I treat all my clients, customers, as friends. I build a relationship with them, and that's why I have repeat sales. It's not just about price, because if the price goes up, because inflation or whatever, those people are gone. But if you build a community and friendships, and the price goes up, they're likely to stay with you, because they're getting more from your business than just the product.
Yeah. So the relationship and the friendship, and that makes me think of, we talk about, I mean, I guess we're going to counterpoint. So we talked about narcissists for a while. Let's talk about some healthy things for a little bit. And when we talk about like relationships with customers and we think about customer service, it's like consideration for the other person, right? And when you show that consideration and that customer service, and and make sure they're happy with it and find out why they're not, and if they're not, fix it, or make it better or offer an incentive. I mean, that builds a relationship with a business that I want to keep as a consumer,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
Which,
exactly what the goal is.
yeah. And out of that relationship, and that makes me think about bartering because bartering's been a hot topic in my brain lately. We've talked about bartering, like trying to get, maybe, working in some ads for your coffee company and stuff like that, and bartering for coffee, or
Yeah,
I traded honey for stuff,
yes.
and bartering is really a relationship device. It's like I've got something and you've got something, but I want to trade in a way that's fair for you and a way that's fair for me. Like, and I had the opportunity to barter with a rancher friend of mine, and I had, 7 ounces of honey, and he had, you know, cattle and eggs, which are like gold now. But so he had eggs and cattle, and he offered me 3 pounds of hamburger, a dozen eggs, and a ribeye from one of his cows in exchange for half a pint of honey. And of course,
Oh
I took
wow,
that deal.
good deal.
But then, what I loved about the bartering aspect of it was I was like, so is this fair for you? And he was like, yes, it is. And it was his deal, right? I just said yes. And then he said, well, is it fair for you? And I said, man, this is amazing. I'm grateful. This is amazing. And then we're like, cool, thanks. And shook hands. And, I meet with him every week for coffee. And if he needs help around the ranch, he just gives me a call and I'll show up and help him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm buying some beef from him. I'm buying at least a quarter of a cow from him when he has more come available here. So, the relationship continues. And it's like, there's this weird relationship dynamic, weird in a good way, I guess, where you're like, well, I'm not sure I quite gave enough. I'm looking for an opportunity to give a little bit more. Well, that's really generous. Okay, well, I'm going to look for an opportunity to give a little bit more. We're competing to not really outgive each other, but just to make sure there's like a little bit of space there between what's actually fair and also being generous. And it's
Yeah.
like everybody's trying to be generous in the bartering relationship, at least the ones I've seen, where I'm not like, well, no, I don't think that's fair. You should give me a lifetime of coffee for 2 ads, chef, or whatever. And that's fair.
I wish I could afford to do that, but
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not trying to get that deal, right? Because that's not fair. That's not sustainable.
I think it
I
has to do with
want,
I think
go
it has to
ahead.
do with I think it has to do with equitable value.
Yeah,
The rancher valued that half a pint of honey. He knew what it was worth to him.
right.
And then when he made his offer to you, you're like, well, I think that what you're offering me is more valuable than my half a pint of honey. But if this is so, let me give you a, a, a a whole pint. And he comes back. Well, no, 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 no. Then I'll have to give you more eggs. Well, you've reached equity.
Right.
Equilibrium is the word I'm looking for. You've reached equilibrium, not equity, and that's what the barter system is made up. That's what makes our current, little macroeconomics lesson here. That's what makes our current Federal Reserve System such a farce and unequitable for everyone. When you deposit money in a bank, they're not loaning that money out to the next guy who comes in to borrow. They make that money up out of thin air.
Hmm.
It's a reserve banking laws. 9 to 1 is the current number. For every $1 they take in deposits, they can loan out $9 that don't exist.
Okay.
And now they're going to charge interest on that loan as well. That's where they get paid. They get paid by loaning you money that doesn't exist. They made it up out of thin air, and you're paying them interest. But you're paying the
Yeah.
loan back with real money that you worked for.
Right.
So it's there's no it's not an equilibrium of value. There's no equity
Right.
of value. You're giving them something way more valuable, and they're giving you the illusion of something valuable. They just
Right.
made it up out of thin air. There's nothing backing it up. It's not like when we were back on the gold and silver, backing up our currency. We weren't. No, there's nothing. It's a green IOU. And so that's why it's doomed to fail. Because as soon as you figure out you can just print your own money, what's holding you back?
Well, I mean, that brings us full circle, does it? Like, we talked about narcissism in people's lives and narcissism in our own lives and narcissism in business, and now we talk about government practices that look slightly narcissistic.
Yeah.
But well, it's been fun talking to you. The time goes by so fast,
Yeah, it
and
does.
thank you so much for joining me on this episode. And uh, if you want to say
It's always
goodbye and tell us about your business, you can.
All right. It's always a pleasure to sit in with these conversations with you, Aaron. I look forward to
So
having the
much
opportunity to
fun.
do it again. It is. And I look forward to doing it again in the future if the opportunity presents itself. My coffee company is Corsair Coffee Company. It's available online, www.corsaircoffeecompany.com. We have specialty coffee. You're not going to find it anywhere else. You're not going to find this kind of quality. It's roasted fresh. I mean, it's
Right.
not sitting in a warehouse, for 6 months before the supermarket gets it and to the distribution center and then sits on a shelf for 3 weeks before you buy it. And no, this stuff is fresh. It's roasted, 45 minutes away from me. And I don't place large orders because then it will have a chance to go stale, lose freshness. I place orders, very small orders based on the needs of my clients. And so that way they're getting super fresh coffee.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's what I do. I enjoy doing it.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling us about it and talking about bees and just kind of exploring this idea of narcissistic tendencies. And thank you all for listening and have a great rest of your day.
Good night.
Bye.